10 years ago, we decided to do a podcast series where we talked to indie developers about their games and just kind of shot the shit and whatnot. This was sprung on by a trip to PAX, a Penny Arcade Expo, in around 2011 or 2012, I guess 2012 probably, where we met up with a bunch of indie devs and talked about their games and had a really great time and thought, hey, this could be something cool that we could do. This was kind of before a lot of people really started doing it on YouTube and whatnot. But these are some old talks. Obviously, things have changed since then. And I'll just give a little intro to all of these going forward. But I'm going to re-upload these. These never were on YouTube. These were only on our podcast feed. So just seeing if maybe this breathes some new life into them. And some of these talks were pretty neat and interesting. Little weird time capsule. Our first episode is with Miguel Sternberg of Spooky Squid. Miguel has a pretty storied history, especially in the Toronto scene in indie games. He was one of the founding members of Capybara Games, which you might know from games such as Super Brothers Sword and Sorcery EP, Super Time Force, Grindstone, most recently. And shortly after this episode, even, he founded the Hand-Eye Society, which is a Toronto-based indie game arts and culture group, and was the president there for a few years. So Miguel has been doing video game stuff, especially locally, for a long time. This is when he released his first commercial game, They Bleed Pixels, and we got to talk to him about that, and just generally life as an indie dev. You can tell Nathan and I were still trying to find our footing recording this. There's a lot of weird awkwardness and not really sure what to do. I guess that's part of the charm of it, maybe. It's a little cringy for me to listen to myself 10 years ago. But either way, I hope you enjoy it, and there's more to come, so stay tuned.
Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Paul with Pixel Response with my buddy Nathan as always.
Hey, how's it going?
And this is our new venture into doing more indie game content, I guess you could say. We're starting off with a new series where we just kind of talk with indie devs, kind of shoot the shit, and today we have...
Does it relate to spotlights in any way, or are we still sticking with that?
The spotlight thing will be video.
Oh, okay.
So I'm glad I hope a video has come out by the time this goes live.
Right.
So
okay.
Thank you for that.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Anyway, continue.
Anyways, today we have Miguel Sternberg from Spooky Squid. As you may know him from the creator of They Bleed Pixels.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, how's it going, man?
Pretty good. Just finished off being at IndieCade.
Oh, yeah. How's that been going?
It's a great event. It's like, kind of like, it's probably the most indie of the big indie game events, like compared to like the IGF and stuff like that. So it's in Culver City in LA, and it's just a ton of interesting game stuff, like mostly video games, but a few like board games and big games and stuff like that. It's quite cool.
And were you showing They Bleed Pixels there?
I know. Some friends had games on the show. I was just there basically to have a good time and see friends I hadn't seen in a while, that type of thing.
Nice. Shake some hands and all that sort of thing, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, right on. Anything interesting there spark your interest?
Oh, God, too many things. It's sort of like overwhelming. There's this pretty amazing game called Renga, which is played by 100 players using laser pointers and a movie screen.
Okay.
It's sort of like an RTS, but played by 100 players at once. I don't think there's a name for that genre yet. I've seen a few things that sort of how I think of it as sort of like swarm gaming. Like, but very little input as an individual, but as a whole bunch of people, you suddenly have this sort of emergent thing that comes up. It's quite cool.
Cool. That'll be one I'll have to keep an eye on then, I guess. It sounds neat.
How would there be a local gathering or something? Like, that's interesting. That seems to only work in a convention setting.
Yeah, it's been toured. It was in Toronto, but I missed it when I was there, so I was glad I had a chance to see it here in California. But they're basically touring it to movie theaters.
Oh, okay.
You guys who make it.
Okay.
Are there like seminar type stuff too at this thing, like talks or?
Yeah, no, there's talks. Probably seminar, more like they tend to emphasize the artistic side of game development rather than the business side. So
Right. Okay.
they had the guy who made Space War there, like one of the first video games ever. It was like played on old mainframes. So he talked, which was kind of amazing to see because I hadn't actually realized that he was still alive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. I know the Lo and Behold team were there too, showing Mental Drift. Nathan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they were tweeting a few pictures and stuff of people playing their game. Yeah,
so
80
games were there. I think I saw some tweets that this was going on, but it was not within my thing. I couldn't go, obviously. So
I honestly didn't even know it was happening. What's his name too? Brad Muir was there too.
Okay.
He was tweeting up a storm, posting random pictures of just like people talking because he apparently thought that his followers would get something out of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, yeah, I don't know. Anyways, yeah, it sounds like a great time. We should probably try to go.
I've gone to 3 of them and always had a really good time. I missed last year because we're deep into developing They Bleed Pixels.
Yeah.
Do you get to travel to a lot of different events like that, like the PAXs and GDC and such like that, or?
A fair amount. Like when we're really deep in development, there's no time. But otherwise, I try to get out there and like it's a good chance to sort of meet other people doing the same sort of thing and find out like the problems that they've been having and sort of share information and such.
Gotcha.
So it's quite valuable. And also I find that usually I go to one of these things, I see a few new things that I haven't seen before, and it can be quite inspiring.
Right on. So I guess, I mean, if people don't know by now, They Bleed Pixels, it's just kind of a side-scrolling, beat-em-up, kind of asshole-ish game where you put stuff that I try to collect over a bunch of spikes, and then I die over and over again.
I don't know, asshole game. That's like the Maso Core.
The Maso Core, I guess, would be a nicer way. It's the same sort of thing that like Meat Boy brought, where the controls are tight enough that like every mistake is my fault, and I hate that and love it because it makes
hardcore platforming beat up with like an emphasis on having to do really difficult things and showing that you can do them, which also means failing a lot.
Yeah, and boiled in a nice stew of H.P. Lovecraft influences.
Yeah.
Yep. Some good stuff. And I guess, like, you watched my live stream that day a little bit.
Everything from, like, around launch is kind of this blur. I remember seeing live streams. I cannot remember which ones I was watching.
Right. There was quite a few going on at that same time, I realize. You were tweeting about them, and, like, I was watching some of the other ones, and a lot of people were doing a lot better than me, but I guess that's beside the point. So how has They Bleed Pixels done for you? Like, I'm not talking necessarily money terms, but has it been everything you were hoping it would be at this point?
Yeah, no, I'm really happy with, like, it's gotten a really nice reception. A lot of people sort of get what the game is about. The whole fan art thing has been awesome, seeing all these interpretations of the main character from all over the world that people have done.
Right.
That kind of blows my mind as the person who sort of draws all the art for the game. Seeing people who are much better artists than me draw a character that I invented is kind of like humbling and amazing.
Right.
And the whole live stream thing was like a surprise, but like a super pleasant one. I didn't realize I'd be able to just like tune in and watch people play live on the day that the game launched. I hadn't realized that was like a thing that was happening. Because when you're developing, you sort of your head's in the sand because all you can do is like concentrate on making the game. So like those sort of shifts to suddenly like people are live streaming video games all the time can totally pass you by until you sort of launch and head out above the sand and sort of go like, oh, this is happening now.
Yeah. How has seeing other people play your game maybe influenced things that you liked or didn't like about your own game? Like, do you watch someone play and think, oh, I should have done this, or we should have done this? Or are you quite happy with the end product?
I'm pretty happy with it. Like, we had watched people playing it, especially the early level, which is a lot of what people when they're streaming. They usually do it when they first start the game.
Yeah.
Those levels have been through a huge amount of testing and watching people play. And generally, like, what we worried about the most with it was, are they like learning how it works? Are they engaging in the combat in the right way? Are they just button mashing? That's sort of something we try to dissuade people from doing. Are they like messing around with it more and trying some of the crazy stuff you can do with, kicking guys up into the air and then hitting them? And all of that stuff I was seeing in live streams. So I feel we definitely hit the mark there.
Right on. How does it feel seeing your game featured on some of the bigger video game sites? And like, I know Giant Bomb for one had a quick look up on their site, and just like the idea that like thousands of people are seeing your game without you having to pay for like a whole bunch of marketing or something like that.
It's really awesome. There is like these moments where you suddenly realize the number of people who are like playing this thing you made or like looking at videos of it, and that every once in a while you sort of feel like you're suddenly standing in front of a huge number of people.
Yeah.
Completely unprepared for it.
Right.
So it's like both this like feeling that like, holy shit, that's amazing, this is great, and then also this sudden like, what the fuck did I just do? Like,
yeah.
Because like, you spend most of your time in your house, like talking to a few people and not really thinking about the crowds of people who are going to be playing the game. Other than it's this really abstract thing.
I guess, yeah. So, how many people would you really describe as comprising the team, like Spooky Squid? Like in total?
Core Spooky Squid is just 2 people. It's myself doing game design, level design, and art, and Andrew, who does the programming. So it's the 2 of us, but then we worked with Sean Hatton, who did the music for the game, and we had some on sound effects from this guy, Troy, who really came in at the last minute and helped us a huge amount on sound. So the sound had people from outside.
I'm a little curious about playtesting, maybe. Like, is it just you guys going through the levels over and over? Or, like, was seeing people play it on live stream kind of the first time you'd seen a third party go through some of those? Okay.
That would be kind of insane to do.
Yeah. Like, just release it out with...
No, we've shown it publicly at a whole bunch of different events over the last 2 years. So as we were building it, we were sort of exposing it to people and watching them play.
That feedback gets rolled into kind of...
Yeah, so we'd see where they were getting confused, we'd see like sort of what needed to be changed, what sort of people said like seemed to get the most fun out of, and then tried to sort of tune it towards those things. And then when we were near the end, we got a bunch of testers who'd come in and basically play through the game in a day or 2, and we'd watch carefully and make notes and sort of figure out, okay, this little bit of this level needs to be tweaked a bit because it's just too crazy hard, or just doesn't really make sense, or here's a bug that we found. So it's actually been through quite a bit of playtesting.
Okay, gotcha.
And it says here that you're a former co-founder of Capybara Games.
Yeah.
Like, were you just on the ground level with them when they started out then?
Yeah, no, that was way back now. Cappy actually started, a lot of people don't know this, they started making J2ME games for cell phones.
Okay.
Just pre-smartphone, pre-iOS, launching all of that stuff. So trying to make sort of like good games on really, really shitty hardware.
Yeah.
And so I was a part of that sort of early stage of Cappy. There was, I think, 12 of us starting it out. And eventually I left and became a freelance pixel artist for several years before starting Spooky Squid.
Right. How does it feel? Like, I'm guessing some of the members that you've worked closely with are still with Cappy and doing their thing now. How does it feel seeing them get to the level they've been at so far?
It's been really cool to see. Like, it's, in general, like, there's a lot of success stories in Toronto with indie games.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been great just seeing, like, one after another games come out of that city that just do amazing. Like, we've got also Net is there, who made N and N Plus. Jonathan Mack is there, who just came out with Sound Shapes. It's just a lot of cool stuff happening in the city.
For sure. Sorry, Nathan. It sounded like you were piping up.
Well, just around, I guess, yeah, like talking about specific development scenes in certain areas, like, can you put a date on like when it started in Toronto specifically, or like when the talks started happening and the people started networking and meeting and doing stuff, or has it just kind of been an indistinct thing that's happened?
Yeah, there's sort of like both. I think Happy and MetaNet stuff were happening pretty much around the same time, more or less, so early 2000s. And then John Mack came in a little bit later, around the same time that we started having Toe Jam, the Toronto Indie Game Jam. I remember actually post Toe Jam, Everyday Shooter wasn't out, but he has basically like a lost level of Everyday Shooter that you can actually find on the Toe Jam website.
Oh, okay.
That was like messing with the engine for that game. And so that would be more sort of mid 2000s. And then in the last 4 years, more or less, was when the Hand-Eye Society started, which has sort of been an organization that I'm part of that sort of has coalesced all of the different threads of things going on in the city and combined them into sort of more of a unified community. Making games for a while, like everyone would see each other when Toe Jam happened once a year, and then we wouldn't really talk for the rest of the year because everyone was doing their own thing.
Right.
Okay, not even online council, anything, just
Yeah, like a little
separate.
bit, but there wasn't sort of a sense of like an ongoing like day-to-day community like there is now in Toronto.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's sort of been like a set of sort of stages where you can go like, okay, this is when this bit happened, then this happened, then this happened. And so there's
like timeline kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's been sort of milestones, but not like a single one where like suddenly there was a Toronto indie game community.
Okay. That makes more sense. So game jams, like, have you participated in those, or do you like attend? Yeah. Okay.
I've been to every Toe Jam except for the last one because again we were just too busy with They Bleed Pixels. So like they've been doing them for 7 years now. So the 6 before that I went to, and I do like small jams also on the side when people sort of organize little jams in the city.
Okay.
The last
like,
one,
yeah, just personally coming out of PAX, that seemed to be just the thing everyone was saying was like that's one of the most interesting creative things going on that you need to go see if you want to take a look at indie gaming, like game jams.
Yeah, no, they're definitely. They're good in that they're sort of like this chance to do something really small quickly and keep that sort of your creative energy going when you've got a big project going. Because like They Pixels was 2 years, pretty solid. Having little breaks to go like, okay, I'm gonna put this to the side for a little bit, and for 2 days I'm gonna make some other crazy game. And it may suck, it may be awesome, but it'll be done. And occasionally, like you hit one of those, and you're like, "Oh, this is actually something really good that came out of this," and I expand it and make it into something bigger. I think it's like basic, sort of just like keeping certain like muscles going. It's like an exercise for game devs.
Right. Okay. There's also just seems to be a certain camaraderie between developers right now, anyway. Like, a lot of people know other people who are also making games. Like, you've already spoken about a bunch of different developers that you've interacted with and such. Like, does that extend outside of your home region, like city? Like, have you met people at
definitely
other areas? And yeah,
there's a general like, at least at the moment so far, indie games are extremely cooperative. People are trying to help each other out, and no, there's definitely like a international community of indie game developers. It's like when I go to something like IndieCade, I get to see people from other parts of Canada, other parts of the US, from Europe, from North America. There is this real sense of community and of wanting this sort of whole project and movement of indie games to succeed, and knowing that the best way for that to happen is by people cooperating with each other instead of sort of being super guarded and like competitive. Like there's friendly competition. You want to sort of like make that next great game, but it's competitiveness within a larger framework of being extremely cooperative.
Oh, okay. I'm just trying to think where you just backtracking a bit. You talked a lot about kind of having your head in the sand for quite a while. Like, do you not really get to see what else is going on for long stretches of times? Like, do you still get time to play games or see movies or listen to music that's coming out? And or just
it really depends on what it is. Like playing games, I'll play short stuff. When we're really in crunch, I'll play nothing. I've gone and played games now that we've finished, and I'm starting to sort of like stack up. Okay, what are the like large games that have come out in the last few years that I didn't get a chance to play that I'd like to? But
like, what's on the top of that list right now? Like,
let's see. I want to try playing one of the Persona games. I've heard good things about those.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little bit nervous about how long they are. Like as soon as I see something that's more than 10 hours, I sort of get, or like, is that really an amount of time I want to spend playing one game?
Okay,
is it
fair enough.
Fresh ideas in there that'll like keep it interesting for that long?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I played right after finishing They Bleed Pixels. I played 9 rooms, 9 stories, 9 doors. It's 9 objects. I can't remember what the objects are.
For the DS, yeah. I've been hearing a lot of people talk about it.
Yeah.
It's an adventure game?
Yeah, it's like a adventure game, visual novel, room sort of thing. It was good, not great. I wasn't like blown away by it. It's not as good as say Hotel Dusk, and sort of two things in the same genre. And I just finished playing through the last story on Wii.
Right. Oh, okay.
Which I also found quite interesting, like a lot of new ideas, which is unusual for a JRPG because it's become a really sort of conservative genre in terms of innovation.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of innovation, how important is it to you, like creating a new game? How important is it to try to be original with your own ideas as opposed to maybe, like you were saying, you don't have a whole lot of time when you're crunching down to go see movies or play games? Like, is it important that those movies and games that you might have seen don't leak into your finished product, or are you a big proponent of deriving your favorite things from those and then incorporating them into your games?
Well, I think there was that quote about cell phone games derived from big movie blockbusters or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, that had me curious. And like your artwork was on the Crank DVD case and stuff. Like, does those kind of films influence you specifically, or do you try to not do that?
I think anyone sort of acts as though the media they consume doesn't affect the stuff they create. It's kind of full of shit.
Yeah.
To be blunt about it, like that is like I am sort of a proponent of that. Everything is a remix. Kind of philosophy. I think that's how culture works and it's how creativity works.
I'm inclined to agree. Yeah.
There's doing it badly. Like there are other things where you look at it and you're like, that is just a rip-off of something else, and that tends to come from people who aren't really that interested in game design. They're interested in making games as a process. Like as a programming process, but not really as game designers.
And then using someone else's ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's those people who sort of like, I'm going to make, a Tetris clone.
Right.
Okay.
I think sort of like there's a difference between being inspired by other games and outright cloning.
Mm-hmm.
And there's probably a gray area within that as well. But where was I going with this? Yeah, no, I do a lot of my media consumption now is based around sort of like making sure that I'm consuming the sorts of things that I find will spark ideas for interesting games. And that actually tends to be a lot of nonfiction books is probably the biggest influence right now on me in terms of things that spark good game ideas.
Oh, okay. So like biographies and stuff, like real stories about real people, or like documentary type?
It'll be like history of science stuff.
Okay.
Like is this? I kind of want to make this game that's I call it an epidemiological roguelike. It'd be a game of, where you would generate a disease and generate a city, and you'd have to figure out what the vector of the disease was and stop it by sort of interviewing people and such. Probably a game I'll never get to make, but try to generally like look at as many different types of things as possible. And when I play games, I'll often will look for games that I think will have interesting ideas in them that might spark other ideas, rather than just playing like sort of the generic AAA shooter that's just come out.
Right. Like on that note, like, do you go back to previous consoles and stuff and go through older games to kind of look for like it seems They Be Pixels derives inspiration from a lot of NES. Like, is that fair? Like that kind of era of challenging platforming type stuff?
We went through a whole bunch of old games and sort of looked at how they worked. So just going from memory of games I grew up with. I was a Master System kid rather than
Oh, okay.
So, hell yeah. Yeah.
I went and played like Wonder Boy again, and Alex Kidd.
Oh yeah, okay.
But also looked at like modern indie games. At the time we started the project, Super Meat Boy wasn't out. That's the one that everyone assumes was the big influence. And while it's a really good game, it wasn't actually a huge influence. I've played maybe 2 sittings of Super Meat Boy. I really liked what I saw, but actually a much bigger influence was Knit Stories.
Okay, yeah.
Probably my, like, if I were to choose a favorite platform, it would probably be that. I really, really like that game.
Yeah.
There's something about it on a whole bunch of different levels that works really well. But it's not obvious that that's the influence, because it's a completely peaceful game, and we've made an incredibly violent platformer with tons of blood.
Right, it's blood and saw blades specifically that reminds me of Meat Boy.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So yeah, it's often like inspiration can often be really non-obvious like that. I find it can take you in weird directions. So it's often people will look at something and think that it's coming from one direction, but it's actually coming from a completely different one. You see that a lot online, where someone will sort of like claim this or that aspect of a game as a knockoff, and very often, like I've talked to other creators, we'll talk to each other and be like, I've never even heard of that thing that apparently I was knocking off or like copying or mimicking in some way. It's quite funny the way that stuff can work.
Like, I guess, yeah, would you just look at it as like brilliant minds think alike kind of thing? Like, it's just like, I didn't mean to derive this from something, I just came up with the same idea. Apparently,
I think often like 2 things may come from the same inspiration at their core, but they aren't aware of each other.
Right.
Like there's a lot of stuff that's just in the culture, and so people can be inspired by the same sorts of things, and then people assume that that this inspiration coming from one of those things, and I've tangled everything up. That you'll sort of have like a root thing that is inspiring all of these things, a root thing, and maybe it's not super popular, but then a bunch of other people will be inspired by that, and whatever of those becomes the most popular is the thing that people will assume everything else is based off of. But when in fact all of those are coming from some earlier works. Culture is weird and interesting, and I think often the way that inspiration works is much, much stranger and more tangled than people assume.
Yeah, for sure.
Now I'm just sorry. What was that PS2 game that had cover-based shooting mechanics before Gears of War? Can you remember?
I remember that.
It was a Namco game.
Oh,
yeah.
But see, this is exactly the thing. The game that popularizes it is the one you think of. But yeah. And okay.
Yeah, I remember playing a demo of that, and that may not have even been the first one to do that.
But
often, there's some even more obscure game that happened earlier. But yeah, it's often the one that popularizes it that becomes sort of associated with it.
Was it Kill Switch?
Kill Switch.
Yeah.
That's the one I'm thinking of.
I
Yeah,
played
that
it
might be
once.
Yeah.
predates it.
Yeah.
But okay. And I guess like yeah, I'm just thinking like never be afraid to iterate on mechanics that other people have abandoned or whatever. Seems to be another tactic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
unless you're
sure.
like quantum theory and then mess it all up, but that's a whole different thing.
For Gears specifically, I guess.
Yeah, that was really bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or Darksiders just kind of taking mechanics from everybody. But
Well, Zelda.
something. Yeah. but
Darksiders
also,
making Zelda with a different
like
skin.
portal guns and God of War mechanics.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. But don't be afraid to do that if it works.
Yeah, no, I think there's a place for borrowing and mixing and for like brand new mechanics to come in. All of those things, like that's how culture works. It's how games have always worked. Like there's a ton of different versions of chess that exist, and they sort of eventually got the sort of the one that was canonical. But people explore different directions with that. And you see that with kids games and tag and such, where there's tons of different little rule variations, and there's a place for that. Just as there's a place for like brand new out of the blue mechanics when on those rare cases where those happen.
Okay.
Right. So just quickly wrapping up here a little bit. Do you have any movies or video games or books or anything like that of this year specifically that you've been into?
Oh God, brain not working. Honestly, I haven't been consuming a huge amount of media because we've been so deep into it.
Right. Yeah.
Spelunky has been fantastic.
See?
On XBLA.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a great game, Paul. Spelunky is fantastic. We have an ongoing disagreement about that game, but yeah.
We don't necessarily disagree that it's a pretty good game. We disagree on how to play it.
Okay.
Because I like to have fun playing it, and you just like to try to beat it.
I want to be slow and meticulous and get, or run through it when appropriate. I don't know. We can't play co-op on that.
No.
Okay, yeah, Spelunky is fantastic.
Yeah, no. I think that's one of those games that I think is going to sort of spawn a lot of interesting games from that sort of core idea. I think it's one of those things that
like kind of reintroducing the roguelike mentality to this era kind of thing, or
taking the stuff that was good about roguelike and then combining it with actual like compelling gameplay.
Right.
I think he's sort of very clearly pointed. This is a direction that has a whole bunch of interesting possibilities in it.
Like the game you play over and over, but you get better.
Yeah.
And yeah, I found it really, really interesting. Or
think
FTL kind of does that too, but in a strategy context. But yeah, like
I haven't had a chance to try it yet.
It's pretty interesting, especially if you like Star Trek. But it does kind of just a space tactics thing, but again in a kind of bite-sized 1-hour chunks of gameplay experiences. It's pretty awesome. Okay,
yeah.
So Spelunky.
I feel like that whole possibility space is going to get explored a lot more in the next 5 years, and I'm really looking forward to playing all of those games that kind of explore it. Other than that, brain's kind of a blank.
Okay.
I'm reading a really interesting book on the history of like Morse code and the telegraph right now, called the Victorian Internet. It's pretty good. There might be something in there either as world building or as game design that might come out of reading that. There's definitely been a few things that have sparked ideas.
Like just kind of beginnings of global communication, kind of is the.
Yeah, you don't sort of realize how quickly it happened, and like how much, in some ways, like the whole point of the book is that it mirrors what happened with the internet.
Right.
So it was the first case of that type of thing happening. It's crazy. One of the things I learned in it that I had no idea was apparently before telegraph was done electronically, it was the electromagnetic telegraph. Before that, they basically set up a series of like big buildings which could have giant signals on top of them that would be controlled mechanically. And basically someone would stare with a telescope at the next one in the row, and they'd travel along there. They had them going like all over France. These
Okay.
power hills. So I had no idea that Telegraph originally was like this incredibly clunky physical thing of buildings and people just having to cite things and decode it and relay it along sort of broken telephone style.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Yeah. Wow.
I have a brief question, I guess, just about narrative in games. Like, I get it's just been a thing that's been coming up lately. Like, I guess, do you prefer mechanics-driven narrative experiences or cutscenes and more traditional movie and book style text and such?
I feel like there's a place for both. I'm a big
Or like some
fan
hybrid
of,
or
yeah, I'm a big fan of adventure games and some of the visual novel stuff that's happening. Christine Love, who did Analog: A Hate Story, is a good friend of mine, and I really love the work that she's doing with that. And that's largely reading with a little bit of interaction, and yet I still find it really compelling.
right.
So I think there's a place for that. I think people are too quick to dismiss traditional sort of narrative games. I think what's really interesting of blending the two, of doing sort of small story bits that fit together in different orders. There's a lot of stuff like that that I'm actually quite interested in exploring, possibly in the next game or one following it. I'd like to explore that area because I find narrative really interesting in games.
Like where the player determines the order they experience it, kind of, or
Yeah, with that, or like where you've got sort of like a larger structure that is mechanics driven, but then within that there will be little bits of narrative. Have you guys played my earlier game, Night of the Cephalopods?
I haven't yet. No.
I have not. No, sorry. I
Okay, 'cause
apologize.
that was an exploration on delivering narrative through how the player was playing. I did it like late 2008, and after that, Bastion basically does the same sort of thing.
Right.
So it's sort of what Bastion did. It's a very small game. It's only like 5 minutes long, roughly. But there's a bunch of ideas that came from that that I think could be explored more. Although doing that amount of narration can get expensive.
Yeah.
And time consuming to do right. But I think there's a lot of stuff that can be done with what the player does being analyzed by the game and then having a huge table of responses that might give a little bit of backstory based on what they're doing. There's ways to sort of mix very mechanics driven gameplay with traditional narrative in ways that I think haven't been fully explored yet.
Okay.
Right. Is there any advice you'd like to give anybody that might be thinking about starting with indie game development?
Start actually making games. I think that's the biggest thing is like don't sort of like stop talking about the games you want to make and actually spend time making them.
Okay.
A lot of students sort of like think that they need to sort of like finish game dev school before they make their games. And they should be picking up any of the sort of good tools that are out there, whether it's Unity or Game Maker or Flash, and making small games.
Right. Okay. So, is there anywhere people can reach you if they want to?
I'm at Spooky Squid on Twitter, and www.spookysquid.com has all of our games.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you for taking time talking to us about, well, everything, I guess, that we could think of at the moment here.
Except Greenlight, I forgot to ask.
Yeah, do you have any thoughts on Greenlight?
Do you have any opinions on that initiative or?
I'm really glad that we got Beyblade Pixels out before that happened.
Yeah.
Because I think for the next like 6 months it's going to be a little bit of a nightmare while
Like
Steam
trying to
sorts
stand out from the crowd, or
yeah, how to stand up from, like, I feel like what's happening right now is that they've done like a good first attempt, but it's such a hard problem that they're trying to crack with Greenlight that it's going to take some iteration and some like tweaking to get it to the point where it works cleanly and the games that should get to the top and all of that.
Okay.
So it's kind of a bit of a mess right now. I think it won't be a mess in 6 months, but I'm glad that we're not having to be part of the beta test that it's going through. Right?
Yeah,
okay,
for sure. All right. Well, again, thanks for taking time out. Congratulations with all your success and future success. I look forward to seeing more from you guys, and we will be in touch.
Great. Thanks for having me.